that allowed them to move forward. And one of those compromises was that, okay, everybody agreed that everybody who had fought in this war had done so for honorable reasons, and that they were honored for the sacrifice that they made for their country or their state or whatever. And so you did have Confederate leaders who had statues that were erected to them. And, in a perfect world, maybe that should have been problematic. But it was a compromise. So what does this have to do with French and English and bilingualism in Canada? Bilingualism in Canada, okay, is the result of a compromise between the British Crown and the population of Quebec, which was French. It was French territory at the time. And the British beat the French, as you have pointed out many times. And the British Crown signed a treaty with the French government that guaranteed certain rights, and that guaranteed basically the continued existence of the French language, of the Catholic religion, and of the French Canadian culture in North America. Not perfect, but a compromise. And I see bilingualism, French-English bilingualism in Canada, as being part of that compromise. So I'm not opposed to it in principle. In practice, I think that the implementation has been flawed in many respects. I don't see a reason why we should have French critical services provided in areas where there are no French speakers. But I do point out one problem. If you're dealing, let's say you're in a government call center and you're working in Alberta, but you're fielding calls from across the country, then you're going to have French-speaking staff at that Alberta call center because they're dealing with calls from unilingual French-speaking Canadians. So it's complicated. It's for sure inefficient, but hey, I can accept inefficiencies in government. I want to be as efficient as possible, but government is by definition inefficient. And all I could say is, if you've been in the military, as you have been, Nick, you know what I'm saying. I can't think of a less efficient bureaucracy than the armed forces. Okay, so some of the criticisms that you're leveling, I think, are very justified. Some of them, I think, are looking for some kind of a perfect answer where you can't find a perfection because we have to find ways to compromise. I will also take issue with another point that you've made, and that is when you ask, about, well, you didn't ask about other countries being bilingual. You asked about competent government. Okay, all right, I'll concede that point to you, but there are lots of countries in the Western world that are bilingual, whether they're official or not, in their constitutions, and they do provide services in different languages, and sometimes in 3 and 4 and 5 languages, and that's just a fact. And here's a beautiful example, very simple example. And I bring this up only because, as a rugby fan and a former rugby player, I follow international rugby quite closely, and I can tell you that countries like, take South Africa for instance, when they're on the internet, when they play their national anthem is in 2 official languages. The first, I believe, I want to say it's Swahili, but I'm not sure. But it's an Aboriginal or a First Nations African language, and the second is in English, which is actually funny because most people in South Africa speak Afrikaans, which is a Dutch derivative, as you probably know.
That's right.
In New Zealand, when they do the national anthem in New Zealand, they do it in Maori and English. And if you go to England, you can get services. Well, the BBC has BBC in Scotland and BBC Wales. That's all in Welsh. and asked the Prince of Wales what was the hardest thing the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, had to do before he was invested as Prince of Wales. He had to learn how to speak Welsh, right? So it's not as straightforward, and we're Canada, I have to tell you frankly, and I say this with a smile on my face. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not defending the implementation of official bilingualism. I think there are real problems where in some instances they've gone too far. In some instances they've just been stupid about it. Perhaps in some instances they haven't gone far enough. I don't know. But I'm not defending its implementation. I'm just defending the idea and principle. And to say that Canada is the only country, and I'm widely traveled, as you know, Nick. Canada is the only country that I'm aware of where people insist on not being bilingual in principle. Like if I go to France, you're right. People can speak French in France. People speak French in France, but most people speak English too. If I go to Germany, people speak English as well as German. Okay, but they also speak French. And if you're in France, you learn how to speak German. And they speak multiple languages because that's the reality of where they live. And French and English is partially the reality of where we live. But you'll never hear somebody say, it's funny. Nobody will go to from Germany and go to France and speak German or try to speak German, and the person that they're speaking to only speaks French. Nobody's going to growl and go, well, why can't you learn German, right? Well, but if you're English speaking, you're probably going to growl a little bit and go, well, can't you learn to speak English for tourists? It's a uniquely English thing, and it's even more uniquely a Canadian thing.
Well, I wish we had more time. Where I'm looking at the clock here, we've only got about a moment or two left. But let me say this: one of the reasons why the vast majority of Europeans speak English, and why the rest of the world has a big leg up on English, is because, as I pointed out before, English is the language of commerce, transportation, science. All these things are done in English. So there is a vested interest in learning it. But in Canada, it's not. It's more of a political whipping boy because, first of all, we don't do it right. I'm not against having people given access if they want it, if they speak French and they understand French far better to speak. Okay, fine, we can do that. I'm not against that. I'm against the inherent waste and unfairness that's built into the system that we have currently in Ottawa. And that's what is where my focus has always been. I mean, why does the Prime Minister have to learn how to speak French when the vast majority of people who live in Quebec can understand and speak English, and those who can't could easily have it translated?
Well, and the opposite is true as well.
So are we looking for the best? Okay, so the question then becomes, are we looking for the best prime minister or the best bilingual prime minister?
Well, fair question, Nick, but I'm only saying, and I know people, especially on our listeners, are not going to like what I have to say. So for all of you guys out there listening, brace yourself, okay? I say people can learn. And by the way, this whole thing is you have to be perfect French. That's just not the case. Factually, I know that factually. Okay, you could pass if you could pass the test, even with just adequately, you pass the test. Okay, so it's a bit of a. I'm not saying that some people have not experienced the being told that they had to be perfect or anything like that, or being in that situation. I'm not trying to take away anybody's personal experience. But systemically, you don't have to be perfectly bilingual to be classified as bilingual in the federal government. But having said that, okay, if I go to France and I want to get a job in the French Foreign Service, and I have to speak English to do that, I'm going to learn it. That's just part of the job requirement. Yeah. And I guess I know it sounds unfeeling, Nick, and unsympathetic, but the bottom line is this: if you have to learn a different language, whether it's French or it's any other language for that matter, if you want to get a job at a bank in downtown Toronto, on Bathurst Street, you got a leg up if you could speak Mandarin. I tell you, okay, because
Fair enough.
Because that's the language of the community.
All right, with that, Joseph,
Yeah.
we do got to stop it there. The clock has shut us down for the
Indeed,
evening.
and it's probably a good thing too.
Yeah, probably it is, because this is a topic we could spend 2 hours on with no trouble at all.
Well, we should launch into it, do a little bit better job of some more detail in that. Maybe in the next couple of weeks, we'll get back into it.
Sure. All right.
Okay, well, that's
I'm
it for
game
me,
for
Nick.
that.
I thanks for listening in, joining us tonight, guys, and as always, and don't forget to share with your friends and family and neighbors. Post on Facebook, post on Twitter, and all of those lovely things. And I will catch you next week. And over to you, Nick.
All right. With that said, I'm going to bow out myself, and I wish you all a great week. Ubi caritas et amor, Deo CBS. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.